Welcome to Zen and the Art of Motorhome Cooking. I'm Stacey Joy, and today I'm going to show you how to make sourdough bread. It is the best bread to make on the road. So since this is Zen and the Art of Motorhome Cooking, it's simple and easy to make. All you need is a little forward planning, patience, and a magic ingredient. So the reason you need a little forward planning and patience is because in order to make good sourdough bread, it needs to rise 3 times. So let's start with a magic ingredient. So here is our sourdough starter, and instead of having to buy yeast, we carry this sourdough starter. It's been with us a year, and I made this from wild grape skins when we were in New Mexico. Now, sourdough starter is super simple to make. Now, if you ever notice on the skins of grapes, you'll see a chalky, dusty coating. That's natural occurring yeast. And the one before this, we used a papaya skin. It's on all fruits. In this case, we used wild grapes. So I took about 5 to 6 grapes, put them in a jar, covered them with white flour, and sealed the container. And after the 2 days, you take out the grapes, so you just have the flour, and the yeast have been mixed in with the flour now. You add a little bit of water until it's about the consistency of cake batter. You mix that in, and then you reseal it and leave it for about a week, or until it starts to become active and you'll see bubbles in it, and then you know it's ready to go. So for the first rise, we use a cup of flour. So I'm going to dump that in the bowl, and 2 to 3 tablespoons of our starter. 1, 2, and 3. Since we use a cup of flour, you're going to use half the amount of water. So half a cup of water, and we just take this from our Berkey filter here. The best kind of water you want to use as possible, so spring water or filtered water. That's going to go in, and then you just mix it all together. And again, you want it to be about the consistency of cake batter. And this first rise is called the sponge. So we're making the sponge of the sourdough, which is what gives the sourdough its sour flavor. So here in Antigua, Guatemala, we're up in the mountains and it's a bit humid, so we're going to need about 10 to 12 hours for the sponge to rise. Now, the great thing about sourdough bread is that you can make it anywhere, and we have made it everywhere. The jungles, the mountains, the coast, the desert, and it's all turned out great. The longer you leave the sponge, the more sour your sourdough is going to be. Okay, so as a rule of thumb, if you're on the coast, let's say, and it's hotter, and you're lower in altitude, it might only take 6 to 8 hours for this rise to be ready. The colder or higher you are, you might need to leave it 24 hours. So once it gets to this cake batter consistency, you are ready to leave it. So we cover it in an airtight container. Now we need to feed our starter. So whatever you took out, you put back in again. I took out 3 tablespoons. I'm just going to put in 3 more tablespoons of flour, or about, and about half that amount in water. So just a little more water from the Berkey, and we'll mix that in a little more till it's the consistency of cake batter again, and then it will magically regenerate. And to celebrate, somebody just set off the firecrackers while I was doing that. I'm going to pop the lid back on and seal it and be ready for the next day. Alright, so this is the second rise, and I actually left this overnight because we got a little late start yesterday making the sponge. Usually I'll make the sponge first thing in the morning and leave it all day and do this part late in the evening. Let's see how it looks. So I can smell that it has really nice sour aroma. So we're going to have some lovely sourdough. The first thing we're going to do is add another cup of flour. And then I'm going to add about a tablespoon or 2 of salt. I usually just add 1, but some people like to have 2. So we've got a cup of flour and a tablespoon of salt, and then I'm going to add a cup of spring water in there. And that's probably all the water you're going to need. I like to do this part first and mix all the water in so the flour mixes in easier. Otherwise it gets a bit goopy if you add all the flour at once. Add another cup of flour. And we're looking for a doughy consistency. So today we're making just straight sourdough bread, but this is the stage if you want to make whole wheat sourdough or rye sourdough where you'd add that flour. And we experiment with all different kinds and you can have fun with this. So it's not quite there, we need one more cup. So this is 3 cups in total, but you can see it's pretty sticky, so I'm going to actually add some more as I'm kneading this. So now you're starting to knead the bread. Alright, so let's add some more flour. So the more you knead the bread, the more it will rise. Okay, so I've kneaded this for about 5 minutes and shaped it into a nice little ball here. And I'm going to set that back in the bowl so it can rise nice and evenly. Cover it again with an airtight seal, and you're ready to leave it for your second rise. And this part usually needs about 4 to 8 hours, again depending on how warm the climate is. This part I usually do right before I go to bed and then wake up in the morning to bake the bread, but since I left it overnight and I'm doing this first thing in the morning, this will be ready for afternoon tea time. Okay, so here we are with our final rise, the third rise of the bread. So let's see how this looks. And as you can see, it's risen nicely, and it's been about 7 hours since I did the second rise. You just need a little bit of flour for this. I sprinkle a bit over the top just so when I'm taking it out of the bowl it doesn't stick to my hands. And then I have this lovely half-moon shaped pizza stone that has broken on the road, but it's actually a perfect shape for bread. So sprinkle some flour on your baking sheet or your stone, in this case. I'm going to gently tease this away from the bowl and out. There we go. So I'll just gently tuck the ends in, and to save time, I don't want to knead the bread too much because then I'll have to let it rise more. Another thing I'll do is score it. And if you're a baker or a proper baker, you probably would want to use a scalpel. But we're living in a motorhome and I just have steak knives, and it tends to work just fine for what our needs are. And the reason why you do this is that so when you're cutting it after it's baked, it doesn't break apart. You're ready to let this rise for the third time. Usually this only needs about a half an hour. Sometimes I'll make garlic bread or add herbs and I'll knead it again and then form it. This was just gently done, so it's not going to need that much time. If I do knead it again, it'll probably need either 30 minutes to an hour to rise. So we've waited about a half an hour for the third rise. I've set the oven to 500. It's as high as it'll go on our motorhome oven here, and we are ready to put it in the oven. So have a look at our sourdough bread ready to go in the oven. Okay, and I set it on the third rack so it's not directly above the flame. Just pop it in. Because if it's down right above the flame, it has a tendency to burn. I'm going to set our timer to 40 minutes. After 10 minutes, I'm going to turn it down to 400, and then once the bell rings, we'll take it out. As I said before, sourdough is the best bread to bake on the road. Not only because you don't have to buy yeast, you've got your starter with you the whole time, and it's also a really healthy option. We thought that Matthew was gluten intolerant for the longest time because every time he ate bread, he would get inflammation in his stomach, he would have headaches, he would be grumpy. It was just not a good scene. And then our friend, who's actually an expert baker, said, are you sure he's allergic to gluten? Because it might just be that he has, he's allergic to yeast. Oftentimes what happens with commercial bread is that the yeast is added and it's not allowed to rise, and plus they've got a lot of other processed things in it. So he tried her homemade sourdough and he didn't have any issues. It was completely fine and it was delicious. So I said, okay, I've got to learn how to make this, and I did, and we've been making it ever since, and it's a staple in our family. We love it, and you'll soon see once we take it out of the oven. Alright, so we are ready to get our bread out of the oven. Let's see how this looks. Alright, I'll turn it off. Reach in. Alright, looks good. Check that out. Just set it on top here to cool. So I'm going to leave this to cool for about 10 minutes. Matthew's just got back from the outdoor market with some avocados and some fresh cheese. So he's going to whip some guacamole up, and we're going to have fresh hot sourdough bread under the cover of Merlin the Magic Bus. It just started raining outside, so this is going to be a great tea time.
Well done, Mama.
Thank you, Raph. I'm not the best. So if you enjoyed watching this video and found it useful, please subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to hit the little bell next to the subscribe button so you get notified when we post next. And please comment in the section below. Let me know how you get on with making this sourdough bread, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.